Hello everyone, this is Professor Kent. Today's recording is to take up the homework. This is part 2, and today, in this video, I am going to be doing problem 4, and we're going to be doing both FIFO and weighted, and we're going to do the full production report step by step. Let's do the easy one and the one we are getting tested on next week. So weighted average cost, and then we'll do the same thing, everything for FIFO. So first we are going to say beginning working process. That's our first one, and we are saying units to account for, or we could call it a quantity schedule. Units to account for beginning working process. They told us they were 20,000 units in the beginning, and they told us we started during the production, started into production or in the process, and that is my 100,000. If I add them together, it's called total units to account for, and it is 120,000. And if I needed to account for, and the total units accounted for, that is units accounted for. And we have ending work in process. They told us in the question, they did not tell us, but they told us units completed and transferred out. So I know they both are going to be the same, which is 120,000. We have completed and transferred out. They told us this is 90,000, and this is going to be my X. And if I take 120 minus the 90, that will be your 30,000. So we already figured out my X is 30,000. Now we're ready to do our equivalent units. So let's do our equivalent units at the top. ENT units. Equivalent unit, they have it for material, labor, and overhead. Material, labor, and overhead. And when you're doing that, it's 100% complete. It'll be 100%. Multiply by the 100%. Multiply by the 100%. My working process, I needed to know how much they were complete in the form of material, labor, and overhead. They told us in the question. Did they tell us July 1st? Oh yeah, they did tell us. They told us in the question, July 80% in material, 30% in the labor. So 80% here, 30% here, and 30% here. 80 times 30 equal to my 24,000. 80 times 30 will give me 9,000, and this will also be 9,000. If I add them, it will give me 114,000. Equivalent unit for material, 99 for labor, and we also have another 99,000 for my equivalent units for my overhead. My next step is, of course, I needed to calculate the equivalent unit, and they told us the material they told us, and we needed to double check if it is right. So quantity schedule we done. Cost per equivalent unit, that's what we're doing. So less cost for equivalent unit, and that we needed to account for. When you do that, we also have a material, labor, and overhead. Now it is the cost that we are calculating. So what we have is here the working process beginning, that we completed some of the inventory in there. The cost of the material for the working process beginning that was completed within this production period, the cost was 3,000 here, the 2,500 here, and 4,500 here. If I add everything together, and that will give me total cost, and that will give me I think $10,000. Yes, this will be 7. Yeah, $10,000. That's the cost, and then what we did cost added during the year. Cost added during the period or during that month, whatever we're doing this schedule for, during the month, and that was they told us cost added in the month of July, and they told us different prices, different costs for material. So material is 180,000. This is your 25,000, and here we have 75,000. And that is 75,000. So now if I add all the costs together, I will get 75, and that will be 280,000. The cost that I needed to account for is 290,000. That's what, when you're doing the reconciliation, we have to come up with the 290,000. If you don't come up with the 290,000, that means we made a mistake. The first one is we need to calculate equivalent unit. This pen is not as equivalent unit for material, for labor, and overhead, and I needed to put them together. 83,000. This is my dollar value, and this is also my dollar value, and that is 27,500. 75 plus the 4.5, it'll give me 79,500. So this is my dollar value. Dollar value divided by the unit will give you equivalent cost per unit as a whole, and we're going to get it as a whole or as a individual material, labor, and overhead. 183,000 divided by 114, 275,000 divided by your 99,000. That's for your equivalent unit under labor. 79500, equivalent unit is 9,900. So let's work out the numbers and what the total cost is. 183 divided by 114 gives me 1.60. I'm going to do it at 3 decimal places. 50,27500 divided by 99,000. I get 0.278, and my last one is 79500 divided by 99,000 gives me 8.803. If I add my 3 costs, which are material, labor, and overhead, it will give me the cost per whole unit, and that will be your 2.6861. So plus your I wrote 686. So that's the first thing, equivalent unit. Now we're ready to do a reconciliation, and that's our next step, is the cost to account for. So the cost that is accounted for. Again, we have a material, labor, and overhead, and we have a completed and transferred out. Completed and now transferred out, and we know that the unit that we transferred out was 90,000 units and transferred out, and we know that for material, labor, and overhead, they're all 90,000. Either you do it as a whole unit, which is 2.2686, that's the cost, that total cost we're accounting for, or you could do it individually cost. So you could do 90 times the 1.06 or 1.278 or 0.83. Either way, you'll get a same answer. My answer is 241,749, or you could do is 90,000 multiply by $605, 90,000 multiply by the cost of a labor per unit, equivalent unit, 90,000 multiply by 0.803. If I add these three numbers, once I get the number, and it will come up with the same number. Then we have a working process ending, and the material equivalent unit is different, labor is different, overhead is different. So my material was, if I always have to go back to equivalent unit schedule. 2400, no, it's 1,000. 24,000, 9,000, and we have another 9,000. Multiply by my material cost is per equivalent unit is $605.278 and times 0.803. So that's what the cost is. So I'm just gonna, you don't need to put an equivalent unit. Tell you the truth, you don't need to do it, but if you want to visually see it, you could do that. Now I'm gonna add, that will be my 38,527, and this will be, I don't know, 9,000 multiplied by 0.278 gives me 2502. 9,000 multiply 0.803 give me 7227. If I add all the cost, I needed to come with the 290. Let's see if we do. Yes, I'm a little bit over 005, which is the cost that I accounted for. Cost accounted for. You will be asked to do this. Make sure you're doing it, you're practicing it more than one question. Now the same question you will be asked to do under FIFO, and that like I said, that it will be in a form of a case study. You will not be tested on it, but then our job is to my job is to show you everything. So the only difference is going to be, it starts from the first one, when you're calculating your equivalent unit. And let's put it together. I am going to have, the ending is exactly the same, but I needed to change because I needed to change. Now my transferred out will be different, because what we are going to do is we are going to have a beginning working process, and that was your 20,000 units, and this is your 30. I need to come up with 120,000. My transferred out will be my 70,000. We have a material, labor, and overhead. We are, for working process, we're only going to do the remaining. So let's look at your remaining. Remaining is your, they told us the remaining completed. Did they tell us for the working? Yes. So if it came as 100% completed, so we will have a 0 completed here, 20% completed here, and 20% completed under the overhead. 80% came as completed, so we did the remaining 20%. So first one, you're going to have a 0 because they were 100% complete. My next one will be 4,000. My next one will be 4,000. So I am going to do 70,000 here because they're 100% complete. 70,000 here, 70,000 here, and my ending was 30,000, and we know that we completed 80% in the form of a material. 27,000, 9,000, and we have another 9,000. If I add them together, I will get a 94,000 equivalent unit under the material, and I will get 83,000 in a form of a labor and 83,000 in a form of a overhead. You could have put it together, but we are going to put labor and material separately. So that's our first step, and we also calculated the equivalent unit. Once we get the equivalent unit, now we're calculating the cost per equivalent unit. Cost per equivalent unit, and that will be first what we needed to do is for that, if it is for the period, when you're calculating the first difference, when you're calculating the cost added during the year, and we're gonna cost cost added during that period. In this case, added during the month of July. We know 180,000, 25,000, and we have 75,000. And what we're going to do is add them together. The cost is 280,000. That's what the cost I needed to allocate to material, labor, and overhead to 94,000 units, but in a different way. So first thing is to calculate it. The cost per material equivalent unit divided by this number divided by your unit, which is 94,000. 25,000 divided by the 83,000, 75,000 divided your 83,000. I am going to get a cost per equivalent unit per unit 9414, and then I take the 25,000 divided by your 83 gives me 0.301, and we have 75 divided by 83 gives me 0.904. As a whole equivalent unit, as a whole unit will be if I add these three numbers together, because I needed it for the transferred out. So if I add them together, it should be equal to 3.119. That's what I got, 3.119. So that's my equivalent unit. So the next step is to allocate it. When you're doing an allocate, it is a little bit tricky, but it is not tricky. So when we have the cost, what we have the cost that we added that came with the it's the cost data that came with the product that were completed. And what we have is we have a material, labor, and overhead. First one is, if I were to think about it, first one was my beginning working process. I had 10,000 that was completed, 10,000 units that came with the portion that was completed, and some products that we completed within this period. I will have to do material, labor, and overhead. They were 100% complete. I will take a 0, multiply by 1.9414. It's going to give me a 0. For the labor, it is 4,000 unit that was completed in this period. The cost of completing for labor is 0.301. My overhead was also 0.904. If I add them together, let's see, what do I get? 4,000 multiplied by 0.301, I get 1204. So I can even put it here if you wanted to see it. Material was 0 and labor was your 1204, and my overhead will be 4,000 multiplied by 0.904, and it comes up to be 3616. You can put it this way, the cost, but you don't need to worry about it. I like to do it in this way. So your first number is equal to 0. My second number was, I don't know, 3616. I deleted it. 4,000 multiplied by 0.30 was 1204. So that's my first cost that I allocated. My second one is units completed and transferred out. We know that the units and completed transferred out was it was a 70,000. I'm going to take my 70,000 multiply by the whole unit, which is 3.119, and that will be 70,000. That came up with for me is 218,330. That's what I come up with. You can carry it to 4 decimal places. I don't need to do it. Working process ending, and I have a material, labor, and overhead. First, I needed to do the unit. The units are 24,000 units for the material and 9,000 for the labor, another 9,000 for the overhead. The cost here is 1.9414.301.904. This is sort of when you're doing a production report, it is sort of a memorizing. Then it is you're just applying what we did. It is 46594 9,000 multiplied by 301.2709. I have 9,000 multiplied by 0.904 gives me 8136. So if I add all the numbers together now, these are the costs that are during the period. It should come up with the cost that we are reconciling, 280,000. I am going to put it in here. Now I am the cost that I reconcile or cost that we accounted for, whatever the word you want to use. I needed to double check it, 10,000, because I don't have an answer. Book does it differently. 218330. They don't separate it. 6594 2709 8. I got a number of 290,592. That is incorrect. Did I make a mistake? 18. The only mistake we could make it mix it in these costs. 180,000 divided by your 94,000. Oh, I know. So this number should be, instead of that number, it should have been 9.1915. Let's check all the numbers. I made a mistake. Divided by 83,000. That is good. 75,000 divided by 83,000. That is also good. Plus 3.01 plus your 1.915. Oh. So that should be 3112, which is okay. The only thing is I made a mistake here. That number should be 9.195. That is 0, didn't change. I will have, this number is also incorrect. That I multiply by 1.915. That should be a different number. 24,000 multiply by 1.915. I got 45,960. I think the rest is okay. So let's look at it. 10,000 plus your 1204 plus 3616, 218330, 45,960, 2709 plus your 81. 289.955, and it should be, oh, I didn't do that. That's my mistake. So the cost that we brought in was 10,000 for the cost we brought it in was 10,000 for the beginning working process. How did I get it? You have to add it here. The beginning working process that we need to account for. So that'll be 290. And I was wondering, why am I getting a different number? So if I were 289, and it's a rounding, so that's the number. It's a rounding. So in this case, it is a rounding. I think we are good with what we just did. So this is the cost of a FIFO. The cost reconciliation we did for FIFO. It shouldn't take, when you're doing these type of questions, it took me, even though I had to work out each number, it took me to do both in 24 minutes, but I'm only going to ask you to do just the weighted. So I would think that it will take you 20 minutes to just do one. So it will be worth a lot of marks. So try to learn the weighted step-by-step production. So weighted step-by-step production. That's what you have to do. Weighted step-by-step production. Thank you for subscribing to my channel. Thank you for listening, and thank you for being part of my classes. Take care and bye for now.